Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. That fateful morning started out just like any other Saturday. My alarm jolted me awake at the crack of dawn as I dragged myself out of bed to start getting ready. I was absolutely dreading having to plaster on a smile and make nice with yet another random guy from the internet. This was brunch date number 385 for me, after far too many months of my friends' nagging encouragement to put myself out there in the post-college dating scene. I'd gotten so sick of meeting stranger after stranger, making awkward small talk, and inevitably suffering through some sort of deal-breaker disaster. But this time, I gave in to my pal Stacy's pressure and agreed to meet up with Jim, some marketing manager with perfectly cropped stubble in his dating profile pics. I threw on a floral sundress and tried my best to get excited as I made the trek downtown to our trendy brunch spot. As I approached, I spotted Jim right away waiting outside. I have to admit, he was even cuter in person than in his photos. For a brief moment, I thought maybe this one wouldn't be a horror show after all. We exchanged slightly awkward greetings and settled into our wobbly cafe table by the sunny front window. The first half of brunch actually went decently. We made the usual basic small talk about work, pop culture, weekend plans. Jim seemed to loosen up after we each had a mimosa. I started thinking I could make it through a couple hours with this normal, mildly interesting guy after all. But right as I took the last sip of my drink, Jim said something that made me choke. Out of nowhere, he asked with an unnervingly serious gaze if he could take a picture of my feet. I awkwardly laughed it off at first, positive he had to be joking. But his expression didn't change as he waited for me to respond. I fumbled through politely declining, my heartbeat quickening. Jim simply nodded and dropped the bizarre request altogether. I downed some water, trying to recover from the uncomfortable moment. Jim suddenly seemed very impatient to leave and get to the park. I plastered on a smile, hoping the rest of our walk would be less odd. As soon as we started down the sidewalk, though, Jim brought up wanting a photo of my feet again. He claimed it was part of some charity project and practically begged me to take off my sandals right there and pose for him. My stomach dropped as I realized he was completely serious. I kept refusing as politely as I could while Jim grew visibly irritated. He even tried guilt-tripping me, asking if I considered myself a good person for not helping his cause. By that point, I couldn't wait to escape and put this deeply uncomfortable encounter behind me. When I suggested we just head to the park to enjoy the weather, Jim became eerily quiet. The mood between us grew incredibly tense as we walked side by side in silence. Finally, I braved asking if we could talk through whatever weirdness was happening. That's when Jim exploded out of nowhere. He shouted and called me an ungrateful bitch for not wanting a picnic instead of brunch. A full-on screaming match with this unhinged stranger erupted right there on the busy sidewalk. I was in utter shock at Jim's abusive language and hysterical tone. This was not at all the same put-together guy from 30 minutes ago. I decided I needed to get away from this volatile situation immediately. As I turned to walk swiftly in the other direction, I heard Jim's footsteps pounding after me. He continued his enraged shouting, hurling cruel insults about my looks and character. When he forcefully shoved me from behind, I finally reached my breaking point. I whipped around to tell him off, but Jim cut me off before I could get a word out. He derided my appearance, saying I was so ugly when I got upset that I looked like I was about to burst into tears. I wanted so badly to unleash on this psychopath, but instead I focused on just getting away as quickly as possible. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone to delete his number right there on the spot. I made Jim delete my number too, emphasizing this would be the very last time we ever spoke. He scowled at me and stomped off in the opposite direction. My hands were still quivering as I speed walked the rest of the way to the train station. The adrenaline rush from our blow-up left me feeling faint and unsteady. I kept praying someone would intervene during our sidewalk altercation, but the few neighbors who peered out their windows ultimately did nothing. When I finally made it to the station, I crumbled into a bathroom stall and pulled my knees to my chest. I sat there trying to slow my breathing for nearly half an hour before I felt stable enough to head home. That chilling brunch date was the final straw when it came to my foray into online dating. I learned the hard way that no awkward first date is worth risking ever encountering another volatile creep like Jim. From that day on, I steered clear of apps promising to connect me with my dream guy. It turns out my dream guy was myself all along, a happy, independent woman living life on her own wonderful terms. Looking back, I can see now that I was incredibly naive to think my first foray into online dating would go smoothly. Newly single at 30 after a bad breakup, I decided to give dating apps a try at the urging of my friend Jennifer. She raved about all the great connections and relationships she had forged through swiping and messaging, convincing me to create a profile. I was skeptical that virtual flirting with strangers could lead to anything substantial, but I figured I had nothing to lose. After uploading some carefully curated photos and listing generic interests like hiking, reading, and documentaries, I began the awkward process of introducing myself to potential matches via chat. I stumbled through stilted small talk with a few men before matching with Stacy, a 28-year-old with an edgy haircut and wry smile. We seemed drawn to each other right away, connecting first over our shared dark sense of humor. Over the next 3 months, Stacy and I settled into a comfortable report trading memes, cracking jokes, and texting little updates about our days. I looked forward to coming home and opening the app, hoping to see a new funny gif or quip from Stacy waiting for me. We messaged 4 to 5 times daily about mundane things like what we cooked for dinner, venting about annoying coworkers or links to interesting articles. I felt like I was really getting to know her, even though we hadn't met in person yet. When our busy work schedules finally aligned for a night free, I suggested we grab dinner at a trendy cafe downtown. I wanted to make a good first impression and decided to bring Stacy a bouquet of 3 long-stemmed red roses to mark the 3 months we had been chatting online. It was cheesy, I know, but I was feeling romantic and hopeful of our budding connection. I arrived 20 minutes early, dressed up in a button-down shirt and sporting a few spritzes of cologne. As I paced nervously outside the cafe entrance holding the box of roses, a police cruiser suddenly came screeching to a halt beside me. Apparently the owner had called the cops because they thought I looked suspicious loitering there with a long, skinny package. Despite my attempts to explain I was just early for a date, the aggressive officers yelled at me to get on the ground and put my hands behind my back. One frisked me while the other grabbed the box of flowers and shredded it violently, strewing my thoughtful gift across the concrete. Of course, this whole mortifying interaction went down just as Stacy pulled up for our date. I flashed her an embarrassed smile as the cops searched me and scattered my roses. She raised her eyebrows, clearly puzzled by the dramatic scene unfolding. After the officers apologized gruffly and cleared out, Stacy and I headed inside, both feeling uneasy after the unexpected run-in with the law. I tried to break the tension with some awkward jokes about my welcome committee as we ordered wine and appetizers. Stacy seemed unsure how to react, but finally started to relax after we changed topics. Just as I thought the date was getting back on track, things took a turn when we decided to catch a movie at a nearby theater afterwards. About 20 minutes into the film, Stacy began loudly whispering snarky commentary that was disturbing the other patrons. As the movie progressed, her remarks got progressively louder and more disruptive, despite my attempts to gently shush her or the glares coming from nearby rows. She remained oblivious, even shouting a few times at climactic moments and angering the entire audience. I finally insisted we leave before the situation escalated. Wanting to give Stacy another chance to redeem herself, I agreed to let her drive me home. That's when the night went from awkward to alarming. As we pulled away from the theater, Stacy casually told me to check the glove box and help myself to one of the pistols inside if I wanted. Dumbfounded, I opened it to find 6 guns haphazardly piled up. Stacy didn't react at all to my shock, simply saying, "Oh yeah, be careful with those." My hands trembling, I hastily shoved the pistols back in the glove box and told Stacy to let me out immediately. I got out of that car as fast as I could, scribbling down her license plate number in case I needed to report her later. Still reeling from the traumatic chain of events, I went straight to the police station. The cop at the front desk was one of the officers who had searched me in front of the cafe earlier. He chuckled when he saw me again so soon, joking rough date tonight. Too rattled to elaborate, I told him to look into Stacy's background. It turned out she was wanted for murdering several former partners that she claimed had attacked her first. I was horrified and sickened at how close I had come to becoming another one of her victims. I immediately deleted my dating profile, resolved to stay far away from online dating after my first foray went so horribly awry. When Jennifer asked excitedly how my date had gone, I just shook my head in numb silence, unable to begin to summarize the ridiculous disaster of an evening. I wasn't prepared for the dark side of internet dating I had encountered. My confidence was shaken and I needed time to process and recover before putting myself out there again. Despite Jennifer's encouragements that I just had bad luck, I was sour on the whole endeavor. At 30, I felt I had dodged a bullet, but also had my navet shattered. My one attempted leap into online dating had crashed and burned spectacularly, leaving me wiser but wary. Oh man, where do I even begin with the absolute nightmare first date I had with this guy I met on Tinder? It started off innocently enough. I was bored one night and decided to re-download the app and see if there were any interesting guys in my area worth talking to. After about a week of swiping, I matched with Dave, not his real name. Dave's profile immediately caught my eye. He was insanely attractive in his photos with piercing green eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. Plus his bio made him seem sweet, laid back, and genuinely looking for a relationship. We started messaging and really hit it off. The conversation flowed easily and he came across as very funny, interesting, and complimentary towards me. I was definitely into it. So after a couple days of consistent chatting, Dave finally asked me out on an actual date. He said he'd love to take me to this great little bistro downtown that had amazing food. I happily accepted. The place sounded adorable, and I was super excited to finally meet this guy who I'd been really vibing with. We had plans for that Saturday. As the day got closer, I found myself feeling genuinely optimistic and enthusiastic, which was surprising for a first Tinder date. I took extra time getting ready, making sure my outfit and hair and makeup were on point. I didn't want to admit it out loud, but I was really hoping Dave could maybe turn into something more than just a first date. The day arrives and Dave is right on time to come pick me up. I opened the door and whoa, he looked so much better in person than even his photos. Dave was seriously model-level gorgeous. I'm talking piercing green eyes that made my knees weak, dirty blonde hair that looked styled but effortless, and a smile that could light up a room. I was immediately attracted to him. We hug, and the conversation picks up right where it left off over text. He seems relaxed, funny, interested in what I have to say. Over the 30-minute drive downtown, I'm practically swooning inside my head. Dave was charming, sexy, and so easy to talk to. I really thought I hit the jackpot here. After about 20 minutes, Dave mentions that some of his friends are getting together for a casual little barbecue and asks if we can make a quick stop there on the way to the restaurant. I hesitate for a minute as meeting a bunch of strangers sounded a little intense for a first date, but Dave seems excited about introducing me to his friends and I don't want to disappoint him. I agree reluctantly, thinking we'll stay for 20 minutes tops just to be polite. We pull up at a nice house where the barbecue is underway and there are people everywhere. I start to feel myself go into social anxiety overdrive as Dave immediately starts introducing me as his date to hordes of people. We make our way through throngs of his friends to the backyard, where I suddenly find myself face to face with his mother and grandmother. Apparently this isn't just a casual friend hangout. It's a full-blown engagement party for Dave's sister. He failed to mention this little detail to me. I plaster a smile on my face and try my best to make conversation with his family while Dave is across the yard taking shots with his buddies. I've never felt more uncomfortable and out of place. An hour passes by and I'm desperate to leave, but Dave is clearly in no rush and keeps promising we'll head to dinner soon. Eventually he gathers up all of his drunken friends and family members and announces we're going to the local pub. At this point I have completely given up on the idea of a nice intimate dinner with just the two of us. I steel myself for more awkward encounters with Dave's wild party crowd. Sure enough, at the pub the chaos only escalates as the booze continues flowing. Dave's grandmother has one too many cocktails and ends up dancing on top of the bar to Zombie by the Cranberries as the crowd cheers her on. I watch in horror, realizing I'll never be able to unsee his Nana doing a coyote ugly routine. It's well past midnight, and I'm exhausted, irritated, and ready to call it a night. Dave is absolutely hammered at this point. As I attempt to discreetly call an Uber, he grabs me, slurring that he thinks he loves me and has never felt this way about anyone before. Spoiler alert, he definitely didn't love me after one disastrous date. Before I can respond, he proceeds to vomit all over my shoes and then passes out of the bar. I'm equal parts disgusted, furious, and miserable. To make matters even worse, Dave's psycho ex-girlfriend then shows up out of nowhere and starts screaming at me about what a homewrecker I am. I'm sorry, but I literally just met this dude tonight. I end up calling another guy I've been casually dating to make the hour drive out to the pub and rescue me. He was not thrilled to get my panic call at 1 a.m., but eventually came and got me out of there. The entire night was an insane whirlwind of discomfort, secondhand embarrassment, and trauma bonded me to a bunch of strangers I never wanted to see again. I immediately deleted Dave from all my contacts and social media, still completely disturbed by the level of crazy I had encountered. I couldn't believe what started off as a fun first date turned into being unwillingly immersed into this guy's family, friends, and erratic behavior without so much as a heads up. It was literally my worst nightmare and so mortifying. I learned to always listen to my intuition. If someone seems a little too eager for you to meet their people and party with them early on, take it as a major red flag. I should have trusted my gut when I felt hesitant about making that quick stop at the barbecue, but I was blinded by just how attractive and charming Dave was at first. I will never again ignore those initial gut feelings out of politeness on a first date. I'm now extremely wary about meeting anyone from dating apps. That experience showed me you truly don't know what kind of chaos and delusion you might be walking into. A curated profile and some cute selfies tell you very little about a person. I'm grateful I got out of that train wreck relatively unscathed, but it was still a night full of cringe that will haunt me forever. I still get chills when I think back to that excruciatingly awkward first date experience from last year. It was one of those memories that sticks with you, ingrained forever as a prime example of how not to make a first impression. At the time, I was stuck in a bit of a dating rut, just mindlessly going through the motions on autopilot. My evenings always seemed to follow the same robotic routine. Open dating apps, swipe away on face after face, chat with random matches I wasn't actually interested in meeting. It had become just another habitual part of my pre-bed phone scrolling, no real intention behind it. But one night, after hours of photo swiping, I got a message notification from a guy named Jeremy that seemed promising. His profile photos showed all the superficial things I tend to look for. Cute dog, muscular physique from regular gym sessions, clean-cut hairstyle, stylish clothes. And his job title of financial analyst suggested intelligence and stability. After a few days of benign text exchanges about work and hobbies, I agreed to meet Jeremy for dinner at a trendy Italian restaurant downtown. I'd arrived first and let the hostess know I was waiting for someone. She led me to a small two-top table at the front window. I situated myself and glanced around, taking in the cozy ambience. Exposed brick walls with framed black and white prints, wine barrels repurposed as tables, candles flickering on every surface. It seemed like the ideal spot for a romantic first date. Just then, I noticed a tall guy entering the restaurant looking around uncertainly. He matched the photos from Jeremy's profile, strong athletic build, short neat brown hair, square jawline. I stood up and gave a small wave to get his attention. After some stiff introductions and an awkward half-hug, we both sat back down across from one another. I smiled and asked how his week had been so far, an innocuous conversation starter. But his response consisted of a mere shoulder shrug and terse fine. I waited a beat, expecting him to reciprocate with a question about my own week. Instead, he just sat there scanning the menu with a bored expression. Strike one. The waiter came by for our drink order, momentarily saving us. We both opted for a glass of Chianti to ease the palpable tension. As we waited for the wine to arrive, I racked my brain for another topic that might get some words out of this statuesque guy. I saw online that you're into fitness. What gym do you go to? I asked brightly, figuring an interest of his might get him talking. Gold's, came the one-word answer. Nice. I've heard they have really great classes, and I started to respond before getting cut off. Yeah, it's fine, he interrupted bluntly. Strike two. I took a big gulp of wine as soon as my glass was served, wondering if I could somehow make it through this entire date only speaking to the waiter. Jeremy was clearly a man of few words, and none of them all that engaging. We ordered food, chicken parmesan for me, steak for him, and I braced myself for the silence to continue. Once our meals arrived, Jeremy ate without glancing up from his plate even once. I pushed rigatoni around aimlessly, lacking much of an appetite. Between bites, I made a few more attempts at conversation, asking about movies or weekend plans, but never got more than a cursory 1 or 2 word answer in response. By this point, I had given up on him demonstrating any personality or social graces. I just wanted to get through this awkward affair as quickly as possible and delete Jeremy's number from my phone immediately after. The second the waiter came by with the check, Jeremy snatched it up before I could even reach for my wallet. "I invited you out. I've got this," he uttered emphatically. His longest sentence thus far. What a gentleman. We walked out without another word exchanged between us. On the sidewalk outside, I turned to face him and formally say goodbye, since he clearly wasn't going to initiate. "Well, it was nice meeting you. Take care," I offered politely, extending my hand for parting handshake. Always go for the handshake on a bad first date. Keeps things businesslike. Yup. See, yeah, Jeremy gave my hand one quick emotionless pump before pivoting on his heel to walk away. No mention of a second date or further contact. Not that I had any desire to repeat this experience. We parted ways seeming equally relieved for the night to be over. My normally 15-minute walk home felt extra lengthy after that taxing interaction. The second I got inside, I kicked off my heels and changed into comfy clothes. Curling on the couch with my phone and a glass of wine, I replayed the whole date over in my mind, trying to analyze what exactly had gone so wrong. Sure, Jeremy had looked the part on paper and filled the role nicely in photos, but in person, total dud. The complete lack of conversational chemistry or meaningful interaction was jarring. You think 2 strangers meeting for the first time would have ample topics to cover: jobs, family, pop culture, anything. Yet we struggled to connect on even the most superficial level. Clearly this was one match better left swiping in the digital realm rather than attempting to date in real life. I resolved to take a lengthy break from mindless app dating after surviving that stilted experience. Meeting organically would be better than forcing conversations with random guys who looked decent online, but had zero personality. At least the memory of that awkwardness would stick with me whenever I considered mindless app swiping again. In hindsight, that total failure of a first date was a valuable lesson about not judging matches solely on superficial qualities or preconceived digital impressions. While Jeremy checked all the surface-level boxes, attractive, athletic, professional career, he turned out to be as engaging as a brick wall in real life. Maybe in time I'll be able to laugh about that uncomfortable evening. But for now, just thinking about it makes me cringe. Here's hoping I never have a first date that painfully awkward and lifeless again. The day had started out so normally, just like any other Saturday morning. I woke up, grabbed some coffee, and did my usual weekend routine before flopping down on the couch to scroll through my dating app matches. Swiping left, swiping right, chatting with a few promising prospects, it was all part of the monotonous yet addictive routine I'd fallen into recently. My last few dates over the past month had been pretty mediocre, filled with stilted conversation and awkward pauses. But I was feeling optimistic about this new match named Alex. We had really hit it off over the app, bonding over our shared interests and similar senses of humor. When Alex suggested meeting up that night at a cool underground bar downtown, I immediately said yes. I was thrilled at the prospect of finally meeting someone I genuinely clicked with. After obsessing over potential outfits for far too long, I settled on some dark jeans and a silky cami for the quintessential date night look. I did my hair and makeup with extra care, making sure to accentuate my green eyes with smoky shadow. Spritzing myself with perfume, I was pleased with the overall effect. I looked hot yet effortlessly chic. The bar Alex had picked was dimly lit, with elegant Victorian-inspired decor. I snagged a table near the back, ordered an old-fashioned, and scanned the room anxiously for any sign of my date. Right on time, Alex strolled in, looking just as attractive as their photos. We hugged awkwardly, both giggling in our obvious first date jitters. Things were going well at first, the drinks were strong and tasty, and the conversation flowed easily. Under the romantic lighting, I found myself captivated by Alex's smile, laughing genuinely at their witty jokes. For the first time in forever, I actually felt a real connection, a spark of chemistry I've begun to think only existed in rom-coms. We closed out the bar, reluctant for the night to end, and made tentative plans for a second date soon. As we stood on the street corner waiting for Ubers, everything changed in an instant. Out of nowhere, I was hit with an overwhelming wave of dizziness, nearly losing my balance. The sidewalk seemed to tilt and spin violently beneath my feet. I blinked hard, trying to clear the sudden blurriness from my vision. "Whoa, you okay?" Alex asked, reaching out to steady me. But when I managed to focus on their face, the friendly concern I expected to see wasn't there. Instead, Alex was staring at me with unsettling intensity, eyes glinting with some dark intent I couldn't comprehend in my disoriented state. My heart began to race, pounding in my ears. I knew something was terribly wrong, though my muddled brain struggled to piece together what was happening. Cold panic washed over me as it hit me all at once. My drink must have been drugged. I turned to run, but only made it a few steps before the sedative pulled me under completely. My legs gave out and I collapsed to the sidewalk, limbs heavy and useless. The last thing I saw before blacking out was Alex looming over me, no trace of the person I'd been laughing with just minutes ago. I have no idea how much time passed before I snapped back to consciousness. For a few blessed seconds, I thought maybe it had all been some twisted nightmare. But then I registered the musty smell, the chill seeping through my clothes, and realized I was slumped on a cold concrete floor in some kind of basement or warehouse. My heart stuttered in my chest, breath coming in panicked gasps. This couldn't be happening, it had to be a bad dream. Desperately, I tried to get my still sluggish limbs to move, to run, to fight, anything to escape. Heavy footsteps approached, and then Alex was there, grabbing my chin roughly and forcing me to meet their utterly alien gaze. Up close, their flawless good looks seemed to melt away, revealing someone, or something, dark and monstrous beneath the facade. Every instinct told me I was in mortal danger, that I needed to get away fast. Survival mode kicked in, primal and visceral. When Alex turned away for a second, I scrambled weakly to my feet and bolted, weaving haphazardly through dingy corridors. Behind me, I heard an inhuman roar that spurred me to run faster despite the drugs still circulating in my system. I lost track of how long I spent stumbling blindly through that maze of grimy rooms, looking desperately for an exit while staying one step ahead of the predator chasing me. By some miracle, I turned a corner and saw the sweetest sight, a door leading out to the night. I hurled myself through it, not daring to look back. My lungs were burning, head still spinning as I sprinted down the deserted street. The creature masquerading as my date had nearly caught me more than once during my frantic escape. But finally, the lights and sounds of downtown surrounded me. I'd made it out alive, though I knew the trauma would haunt me forever. In the aftermath, I was left questioning my sanity, wondering if it had all been some paranoid, drug-fueled nightmare. But my lingering unease told me it was horribly real. I'd narrowly escaped becoming the victim of some evil entity's twisted hunting game. The police never found any trace of the abandoned building I described, writing me off as just another confused girl stumbling home from a bar. But I knew better, and I swore off those addictive dating apps for good, never again letting myself be lured by the prospect of finding love online. Some monsters hide behind charming smiles and flirty messages, waiting to sink their claws into trusting victims. I wasn't about to let myself be preyed again. Swiping right on Chad's Tinder profile seemed harmless at the time. His pictures showed a clean-cut, boyishly cute guy around my age, posing with a big fluffy dog. His bio said he was a pre-med student at the local university. When we matched and started chatting, he came across as friendly and down-to-earth at first. Looking back now, I realize I'd overlooked so many glaring red flags once he convinced me to come over to his house alone. After a few days of innocuous messaging on the app, Chad suggested we hang out at his place instead of meeting up for a proper first date out in public. In hindsight, that should have been my cue to unmatch immediately. But foolishly, I assumed he was just trying to be casual and low-key. I didn't consider the possibility he had sinister intentions. So when Saturday evening rolled around, I dutifully plugged Chad's address into my phone's GPS and headed over there. Right away, the imposing size of his house gave me pause. It was a sprawling, two-story mansion, not exactly typical college student accommodations. As I pulled up, I noticed Chad standing in the driveway next to an expensive-looking boat. He frantically waved me over, directing me to wedge my compact set-in into the narrow space between the boat and the curb. I awkwardly maneuvered my car into the tight spot, leaving barely an inch of space on either side. When I got out of the car, Chad explained he needed room to get the boat out later, but I wondered now if he deliberately trapped me there to prevent any quick escape later. My unease amped up 10 notches when Chad greeted me at the front door in nothing but boxer shorts. No shirt, pants, or even shoes. I averted my eyes, feeling uncomfortable at the amount of skin on display. A little warning would have been nice so I could mentally prepare, but not wanting to seem rude or prudish, I went inside the house anyway. Immediately it struck me how empty and sterile the interior seemed. The only furniture was 2 beat-up futons strewn randomly on the bare floors. No art or photos on the blank walls, no clutter or personal belongings anywhere. For a house of that size, the lack of furnishings felt hollow and ominous. I couldn't imagine living like that long term. Chad had flopped down on one of the sad, sagging futons and motioned for me to join him. Trying not to stare at his lack of clothing, I perched awkwardly on the edge of the cushion. At first, we made standard small talk, jobs, school, hobbies. But soon, Chad's questions took on a more personal and probing tone. He began analyzing my personality in eerily accurate ways, pointing out my lack of confidence, my childhood traumas, my tendency to diminish my own needs. It was like this stranger could somehow read my deepest insecurities and weaknesses right off the bat. The longer we talked, the more invasive Chad's questions became. He grilled me about intimate details of my family and personal life. He wanted to know my address, my roommates' names, my class schedule. He even asked for my blood type for some reason. I kept trying to redirect the conversation to lighter topics, laughing off his naughtiness. But he persisted with the same relentless interrogation. After nearly an hour of growing discomfort, I realized Chad's sweet dog was still nowhere to be seen. The dog's pictures were the sole reason I swiped right in the first place. He was adorably fluffy and looked like the most benign creature imaginable. Hoping the pup's presence could cut the tension and provide an excuse to leave soon, I finally asked Chad when I could meet his pet. But instead of calling the dog in or explaining anything, Chad just gave me an unsettlingly smile and continued bombarding me with unwanted questions. By this point, I was thoroughly creeped out and desperate to get out of there. Chad's evasiveness about the dog, coupled with his invasive probing into the details of my life, made me convinced he had some sinister motive for luring me there alone. Thoughts of identity theft and organ harvesting flickered through my mind, however irrational they seem in retrospect. When I weakly told Chad I should probably get going soon, he began protesting loudly for me to stay longer. He kept checking his phone and begging for just 5 more minutes. This only heightened my urgency to escape. Finally, after much convincing about my fictional curfew, I managed to squirm my car out of the impossibly tight parking spot and peel away from the house. My relief was short-lived, though. The next day, Chad left me a long, rambling voicemail asking I wanted to go on a motorcycle ride out to the remote mountains with him, where we have no cell service, and be completely isolated from everyone else. That legitimately terrified me. Who knows what this unhinged stranger had in mind out there in the wilderness? Needless to say, I did not return his call. What haunts me most is what I witnessed 2 weeks later, when curiosity drew me to drive past Chad's house again. I nearly crashed my car when I saw 5 police cruisers parked out front, lights flashing ominously. This time, the driveway was empty. Chad and his boat were nowhere in sight. For months afterward, the sprawling house sat vacant, no sign of Chad or any activity. I contemplated contacting the police to see if they could tell me anything, but ultimately my uneasiness held me back. To this day, I still wonder what exactly happened that necessitated such a major law enforcement response, and what Chad's intentions ultimately were for me. In hindsight, I'm amazed at my own naivety and terribly reckless decision-making. I'm beyond grateful I managed to escape unscathed that evening. Chad was clearly unstable and plotting something nefarious under his nice guy facade. Let my mistakes serve as a cautionary tale when meeting strangers online. Trust your instincts and don't ignore blatant red flags. And never, ever go to their home or be alone with them until you know them extremely well. Chad was a harrowing reminder that swiping right can sometimes lead to mortal danger instead of romance. My story could have easily ended up featured on Dateline or some true crime podcast if I wasn't so fortunate. Please, ladies, learn from my carelessness and stay smart out there. When my overly enthusiastic friend Emma first convinced me to download the trendy new dating app, I had no idea the horror that would soon unfold. I had been single and focusing on my career for a couple years at that point. Though I was content being on my own, Emma insisted I needed to get back out there and meet someone special. She swore that the hot new dating app was the perfect way to connect with eligible singles in our area without having to go to crowded bars or awkward blind dates. Come on, just give it a try, she urged as I hemmed and hawed. I met my amazing boyfriend on there in like 2 weeks. You just have to weed through some duds first. But it's so easy to chat and get a vibe check before you actually go out with someone. Way better than trying to talk to strangers in person. You can do this from the comfort of your couch and PAs. I had to admit she made some valid points. I was a bit rusty and shy after being single for so long. The idea of a practice run chatting online before meeting up in real life did seem appealing. Plus, Emma showed me tons of fun success stories from people finding love and even marriage through the app. So after her unrelenting campaign, I finally caved and downloaded it to my phone. Little did I know what a horrific decision that would turn out to be. That weekend, I spent hours crafting the perfect dating profile for my first foray into online dating. I picked 3 flattering photos showcasing my lifestyle and interests. One was a candid laugh shot with friends I hoped conveyed my outgoing personality and sense of humor. The full-length photo of me hiking one of our gorgeous local trails demonstrated my active outdoorsy side. And for my main headshot, I chose a dressed-up picture with a big smile where I felt I looked particularly pretty. Next, I agonized over writing the perfect bio to appeal to potential matches. I rambled on about my golden retriever Charlie that I adored, my quest to visit every brewery in town for trivia nights, and my undying love for live indie rock shows. My goal was to seem laid back and fun in hopes of attracting someone with similar values and hobbies for a first date. I wanted to meet someone I could chat comfortably with over drinks, then maybe rock out together at a concert or comedy club if we hit it off. After rewriting my bio at least 15 times, I finally worked up the courage to officially launch my profile and start swiping. My stomach was fluttering with nerves that first night as I began judging strangers' appearances from the comfort of my bed. I felt uneasy basing my swiping solely on a few photos and a short bio blurb. But to my pleasant surprise, I matched with a really cute guy named Aiden right off the bat. His pictures showed him hiking with his dog, goofing around with friends, and dressed up nicely for a wedding. He said he was new to online dating too and hoped to meet someone genuine. I thought he seemed sweet and down to earth, so on a whim I asked him to meet up for dinner that weekend before I lost my nerve. Aiden happily agreed to my date invitation. We picked a trendy new farm-to-table restaurant downtown that I had been wanting to try. As Saturday evening rolled around, I became increasingly anxious about this blind date with a complete stranger. I must have changed my outfit 5 times, wanting to appear stylish but casual. I kept fussing with my hair in the mirror, willing myself to calm down and relax. When the bored hostess finally led me to our table toward the back, I was a ball of nerves. I checked my phone compulsively, feeling silly for arriving 15 minutes early. To distract myself from spiraling, I sipped ice water and scoped out the lively atmosphere and delicious-smelling dishes passing by. I tried to reassure myself this would be a fun night getting to know someone new over good food and flirty banter. But when I glanced up expecting to see Aiden's sweet, smiling face from his charming profile, my heart sank. The angry, unkempt man lumbering toward me looked nothing like those photos at all. His wrinkled shirt had suspicious stains, and he reeked of body odor and stale cigarettes as soon as he sat down. I knew right away this was not going to go well, but resolved to at least get through one quick drink before making a polite escape. "Hey there, sorry about being late. Had to finish watching the game," he grumbled by way of greeting. I braced myself for an excruciating hour making still did small talk and dodging inappropriate questions. Aiden made several crude jokes and lewd comments for our young waitress throughout the meal. I awkwardly tried to change topics, growing more uncomfortable by the minute. His vibe was the total opposite of the charming, thoughtful person portrayed in his dating profile. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and quickly paid the check while he was in the bathroom. The waitress smiled knowingly and wished me better luck on my next date. I sighed in relief once outside in the fresh air, glad to have escaped. On the drive home, I kicked myself for being so foolish. Why did I trust some complete stranger's online persona so easily? Of course, people could pretend to be whoever they wanted on dating apps. I deleted my new profile in anger and vowed no more online dating shortcuts. From now on, I would only meet potential partners through trusted friends, the old-fashioned way. My friend Emma felt awful when I told her the horror story at brunch the next day. She insisted it was just an unlucky fluke and urged me to give the dating app another try. But I refused to risk another unsafe situation with a stranger from the internet. People could use anonymity to easily hide dark secrets, ulterior motives, and even dangerous tendencies. I decided to focus on nurturing my existing friendships and being open to meeting someone special through my own social circle someday. There were no more shortcuts for me when it came to finding real romance. I knew my gut I had to be patient and let love blossom safely on its own gradual timeline. No more swiping right or jumping into dates without being certain of someone's true character. For me, online dating had proven to be an unsettling shortcut full of hazards instead of the fun and easy way to find love I had envisioned. It started out as just another uneventful night for me, curled up on my couch in sweats, mindlessly swiping through a sea of faces on the latest trendy dating app. Ever since my last relationship ended months ago, I'd all but sworn off romance. My friends kept trying to gently push me back out into the dating world, arranging awkward blind dates that never amounted to anything more than stilted small talk over expensive dinners. But after having my heart shattered, I just wasn't ready to make myself vulnerable to strangers again. Most weekends I prefer the company of a pen of ice cream and my loyal golden retriever Max to the forced connections and empty flirtations of dating apps. But on this particular lonely night, I found myself once again half-heartedly browsing the seemingly endless profiles, more out of boredom than any real enthusiasm or hope. As the faces blurred together into a homogeneous mix of indistinguishable smiles, cookie-cutter bios, and cliché photos, one profile suddenly caught my eye and made me pause. Matt. His main photo showed a cute, approachable-looking guy who appeared around my age. He had kind eyes and a warm, genuine smile, so refreshingly different from the cocky gym selfies and pretentious travel shots that cluttered most dating app feeds. Intrigued, I tapped into Matt's profile and was pleasantly surprised to see how much we seemed to have in common based on his thoughtful responses. We liked the same obscure indie bands and offbeat comedies, had matching philosophies on life, and appreciated the same dry, absurd sense of humor. Before I could overthink it, I quickly swiped right on Matt's profile. To my excitement, we immediately matched. Over the next few days, Matt and I started messaging back and forth. The conversation flowed smoothly and effortlessly in a way I hadn't experienced with someone new in a long time. He asked thoughtful questions about my job, family, hobbies, nothing pushy or invasive. I found myself looking forward to his texts lighting up my phone throughout the day. When Matt finally asked me out for dinner that Saturday, I enthusiastically accepted without hesitation. After agonizing over my entire closet, I decided on a flattering black dress for our date night at the trendy new restaurant downtown. I took extra time doing my hair and makeup, feeling a genuine flutter of excitement about a date for the first time in what felt like forever. Arriving at the restaurant, I scanned the busy tables until I spotted Matt sitting alone in a cozy corner booth. He looked up from his phone and gave me a warm, dimpled smile as I slid into the seat across from him. But as soon as we exchanged initial pleasantries, I was hit with an unsettling and peculiar sense of familiarity. As if I'd met this person before, though I knew for certain we had never crossed paths until matching online. I tried brushing it off as just first date nerves at first. However, that creeping feeling of unease only intensified as the dinner went on. Matt seemed to know obscure little details about me that I had no memory of sharing over our messages. The name of my childhood dog, my regular coffee order, the street I grew up on. When I asked Matt how he knew so much, he just laughed it off, joking he must be psychic. But the mounting coincidences kept piling up. Matt made unnervingly specific references to past experiences and private jokes only my closest friends would know. He hinted at oddly precise knowledge of my routine, where I went last weekend, which yoga studio I frequent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I racked my brain trying to figure out how this virtual stranger could have learned so much about me already. And then it hit me all at once, like a tidal wave of fear and disbelief. Matt must have been stalking me for weeks before we ever matched online. Lurking unseen in the background of my daily life, following my every move for his own obsession. I felt nauseous picturing this stranger trailing me to work, the grocery store, and my favorite local haunts, completely unaware as I went out my mundane routines. What else did he already know about me? My hands shook around my water glass as I was gripped by the chilling realization. I quickly thrown together an excuse about suddenly feeling unwell and rushed to grab an Uber home. But I could feel Matt's eyes burning into me as I fled the restaurant, my unfinished meal still sitting on the table. Over the coming weeks, I noticed the same baseball cap and sunglasses appearing everywhere I went. At first, I tried convincing myself it was just paranoia. But soon the coincidences became too frequent and specific to ignore. One night, I was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps right outside my bedroom window. I pulled back the curtains and saw a shadowy figure who bore an unmistakable resemblance to Matt in the darkness. I realized then that this was no longer just an innocent crush or a series of strange coincidences. Matt had become completely fixated on me. He knew my habits, my schedule, places I frequented, possibly even where I lived. My safety was at risk. I started meticulously documenting each suspicious occurrence and sighting of Matt. One day in my office parking lot, I managed to subtly snap some photos of him sitting stationary in a car, then got a clear shot of his license plate as he drove off. I knew this was not normal behavior. After one final chilling incident, I worked up the courage to file an official police report with all the documentation I had collected. In the meantime, I took every precaution to protect myself. I got a new apartment across town, deactivated all my social media accounts, and deleted every dating app just to be safe. No more swiping through faces from the comfort of my couch. I'll stick to meeting people the old-fashioned way from now on. People my trusted friends can actually vouch for. Whoever Matt really was, he clearly had some deeply troubling issues. I could only hope I had acted in time and that reporting each frightening encounter would be enough to deter him from fixating on me or anyone else ever again. But even now, months later, I still constantly check over my shoulder wherever I go. I flinch at the sight of baseball caps and approaching footsteps, scarred by that traumatic experience. My days of online dating are definitely over, but I'll never forget that terrifying first and only encounter with Matt. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and quickly paid the check while he was in the bathroom. The waitress smiled knowingly and wished me better luck on my next date. I sighed in relief once outside in the fresh air, glad to have escaped. On the drive home, I kicked myself for being so foolish. Why did I trust some complete stranger's online persona so easily? Of course, people could pretend to be whoever they wanted on dating apps. I deleted my new profile in anger and vowed no more online dating shortcuts. From now on, I would only meet potential partners through trusted friends, the old-fashioned way. My friend Emma felt awful when I told her the horror story at brunch the next day. She insisted it was just an unlucky fluke and urged me to give the dating app another try. But I refused to risk another unsafe situation with a stranger from the internet. People could use anonymity to easily hide dark secrets, ulterior motives, and even dangerous tendencies. I decided to focus on nurturing my existing friendships and being open to meeting someone special through my own social circle someday. There were no more shortcuts for me when it came to finding real romance. I knew in my gut I had to be patient and let love blossom safely on its own gradual timeline. No more swiping right or jumping into dates without being certain of someone's true character. For me, online dating had proven to be an unsettling shortcut full of hazards instead of the fun and easy way to find love I had envisioned. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.